Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everyone. We are back on the genre train for this episode. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I always love me some harp. And
Do
we,
ya?
I
Do
guess,
ya?
I guess we don't get that really here as much as
No, I don't.
handstands and zip lining, but
Yeah,
still,
I'll have to find the point. There's some part where he mentions he would let no one touch his harp. If
exactly.
I'm remembering correctly,
Oh no, you are
I
correct.
don't
You
think
are
I highlighted that line. Unfortunately, I should have. I don't know what I was
you should.
thinking, but it was like nobody touches the harp. Don't touch
Oh
the
yeah,
harp.
no, for sure, for sure. No, that happens. That's a definite.
All
Be a
right,
reoccurring
cool.
theme.
But before we could get to that,
Fair enough.
oh my god, we gotta suffer through another dream sequence.
I
Jeff,
was
Jeff,
waiting. I was waiting for this. I
uh,
was waiting. I'm surprised. Why aren't the three illusions highlighted, Steve? What's going on? I really expected us to talk about them, knowing it was an illusion. Everything was illusion. He knew the illusion. No,
oh, did I miss it? Where is that line? The illusion,
it's
illusion.
it's right up. It's the
Oh,
end of the
right,
paragraph.
right.
Yeah.
He pressed seeking
Um.
freedom, no an illusion. Everything was illusion. He knew the illusion. That's right. I think I was like so half reading. As soon as I realized it was like a dream sequence, I very
Yeah.
mentally checked out. I mean, maybe even it was the sentence before also blew me away. Some of those ramps led to platforms that had to be directly above the
Right.
ones directly below. Yeah, no shit, they have to be directly above the ones directly below. Like, what is this? Like, why would you say it that way? Like, this is. If something's
Uh.
directly above, the thing below it is gonna be directly
I think
below.
what he's trying to say is that there's no like support. Like you can see one above and then one below, and it's like, how is it supported? Is the idea? It's supposed to. I think it's floating, but I hear you. I feel like
Oh, if he meant
he
to
had
say it was like floating, like. I don't know. I
yeah.
feel like there would have been a different way to say that. Because as I was reading, I was just like, this is redundant as all get out. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I think he was trying to say it's floating without it's floating, but I do agree that he does adopt this. It feels like almost not a full stylistic difference, but I
yeah.
feel like there is somewhat of a difference in this writing.
Yeah.
At least to me, where it looks like he's going for this dream-like quality, right?
Yeah, with
Like
like
he knows a thing.
a lot more repetition, a lot more.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
hmm And like
No,
he knows a thing, but he doesn't know a thing, kind of thing.
right.
Like so. And it's funny, like thinking back in these books, the one that I always do remember is the one we've already read, where Rand's back is broken, and then they wake up and there's like all these rats with broken backs
Right.
throughout the inn. Like that one, like has stuck with me over the years because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's an effective one. Because also I think it's effective because everyone's blaming the cat, and then
Mm-hmm.
the inn like cook is like, my cat wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? It becomes
Right.
like a thing, you know. Whereas this one, I think a lot of these others I just forgot as a reader. Like,
Right.
I don't remember this stuff happening at all.
Because it hits
Um,
the same beat,
yeah,
right? With him touching
yeah,
the maze wall and the
right,
thorn pricking
exactly,
his finger, and then he wakes up and he's
yeah,
like, "Oh, my finger has also been pricked." And I was like,
right,
it just didn't do anything for me. I mean, I think you're
yeah,
right. The rat thing was somewhat effective. I was like, "Oh, this is
yeah,
bleeding over into the real world." But then I was like,
right,
"Yeah, we already got that. You're doing the same beat
right,
over again."
right. Yeah, and I do wonder if it's a way to like show us this other side of Rand. Well, I mean, I think part of it, I feel like the dream sequences are more justified when it's just Rand. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I'm going to go with another reason why they could be justified, but I feel like they're more justified when it's just Rand because it lets you cheat time and space, as we talked about before, that he was like getting to go to Tarvalon when we were leagues away from Tarvalon or whatever,
Hmm.
right? And so that let us like cheat distance and like see kind of the promise of where the future of the story would go. And then I want to say the one after that, or maybe it was the same one, the backbreak or whatever. So I kind of got those, but this one, yeah, I feel like he feels he's locked into this theme of Balsamon finding him, right, or searching for him. But it does seem strange because the Mirror did find him already, and it's tough to tell, like, can Balsamon find him or not? Like, I don't know. It does.
Mm.
It poses these almost conflicting questions.
I do like when he
Um,
accidentally
yeah.
bumps into him.
I was gonna say
Legit.
though, but that part is great. Exactly. When Balsamon is like, "How did you get here?"
They both
Like,
turn a corner and they're like, "Oh, it's
yeah,
you."
yeah. So I do like these moments, and I do enjoy this idea of a continued chase between them. But it does feel, I don't know. I definitely was not
But
as engaged
yeah,
with this part as I was with the next.
but that
You know.
doesn't
But,
even like completely make sense because in the last dream he was
well,
just right at his castle. So
mhm,
why in this dream are we in this big weird maze? Of course it's a dream, so it doesn't need to make sense. But like if it's really
mhm,
like supposed to
mhm,
signify he can't find him, well, like why in the first dream did he find
right.
him just fine? You know. So I don't know.
And
That
I
doesn't
will
seem super consistent.
and I will say I do know some things that like explain a little bit of
Okay.
this, but even with that, it doesn't fully explain it. So this one was odder to me for sure. So I figured you'd be coming at one because dream sequence, right? But
Yeah.
two, because it is a bit strange. This one is personally,
Yeah, it feels
yeah,
like just kind of, taking up some time for pacing reasons, but there's not like a super compelling, at least to me, reason that it's here. And again, it bums me out. I was much happier once we were on the boat,
right, right,
interacting with the crew and the captain, and like having characters actually interacting. I mean, even that, not a ton of consequence happens in this chapter. There's still
right,
some just kind of talk about the world and about the history and
right,
these
yeah, yeah.
giant statues and blah 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 blah. It
Mhm.
feels more kind of
Yes,
pastiche or something instead of like actual story
yeah.
occurring, But like, but I
This
did
was,
like that better than this dream
yeah.
sequence that I was just like, oh my goodness, get me through this.
Yeah, this felt very much like connective tissue. Like if we were to move on to like the on the boat, right? But it's to me, this is what I think Jordan does well. He does, at least if you're interested in the world and the characters, like I enjoy seeing Matt acting differently, and I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
there's like one crew member that like hates them. Like it feels like a journey, and I like, I guess maybe because a lot of what Delman talks about resonates with me. This notion of that what's going to get this hook in your mouth is seeing these things and these amazing places. And I don't know, it's just kind of nice to meet a character just like, I just love traveling. I just love seeing the world. You know what I mean? And it kind of grounds the story for me in a way, as opposed to like everyone we're meeting as someone who wants to like be the most powerful person in the world or just stay in their little village. Like it's like this interesting middle ground, or not full middle ground, but just like someone pursuing something they like,
Yeah, yeah.
not,
I
yeah,
agree with all that, but let's put this dream sequence to bed for a second so we can
oh,
move on to that stuff
sure,
because that
fair
stuff,
enough.
like
Yeah,
I said, I am more into that. I just want to
yeah, yeah.
say, and again, I think it'll maybe make our listeners furious with me, but these dream sequences are not holding up for me. This goes in
Right.
another like a notch on the chalkboard for my teacher who said don't do dream sequences because like I feel like even in this, like Jordan's trying to compensate with his prose for how kind of, wheel spinning this dream
Mm,
sequence is. And I think that's why a little bit the prose feels kind of funky. Like, I think he's like kind of pushing on it a little bit more to carry more weight than
yeah.
it's really able to carry. And so, like, that stylistic change isn't
Mm,
quite interesting enough for me to be like, I'm sick of this dream sequence. And like, also, one thing that I thought was interesting was it like Barrelon or was it only a nightmare, only a dream
mm,
like other men's dreams? And
right.
for a second there, I was like, oh, is this why I liked that one Barrelon dream better
Mm,
because he actually got to like talk to the guy, right? Like he
right.
actually like that
Right.
was a scene is what I liked
Yeah.
about it.
Yep.
And I
Exactly.
was like, okay, well if there's some sort of difference between if the ones he has with what's his head, Dark One face, then and I say face because the guy's face that actually comes up and is a motif in this dream as well. But if the ones where he talks, those are the dreams from now on. Okay, cool. If this is like how these characters get to talk to each other, kind of like in that, you know, new Star Wars movie where Rey and Kylo talk to each other through dreams, but that's kind of the only way. Like, those are the only two characters you care about, so you need to have a way for them to talk to each other. I was like, okay, I can be on board with that. But, like, I feel like, and so we get a little bit of that. I do, again, when they talk, it's fun. I do like he says, I will strangle you with the corpse of the great serpent.
Yeah,
Instead of just like, I will kill you. It's like, what? Okay. All right. Oddly specific, but okay.
No, I love it because, well, the Great Serpent is the never-ending infinity wheel of time sort of thing. Like it's the infinity part of the wheel. Like when you look at the, I'm looking for a place in the book where if you look at like the map at the front, there's the Great Serpent that's woven through the wheel of time. The Great Serpent is in the infinity symbol, and it's the same serpent ring that the Aes Sedai wear. So yeah, no, I love this. Like, that's a line that can only happen in this book. You know what I mean?
I think it could happen in anything. I wasn't even thinking about the serpent of the wheel, but I just like the idea. It was like a way too specific manner of death that he chose. Like, I will. What's the line in Robin Hood where he's like, I'll carve your heart out with a spoon, or something, just like a really way too specific.
No, I mean that. Oh God, he's so great in that movie.
But well, that's funny. I think that was on my mind because I want to talk about him. Who is Sheriff of Nottingham, right? Yeah, I want to talk about him when we talk about Lolita in just a little bit.
Oh, really?
Preview, y'all. By the way, stick around in a couple days for when we flip back to our lit side. But yes. I think that's why that line was in my head.
So for me, I remember distinctly when we did another one of these recordings a bit ago, where I was like, going back to Wheel of Time, it's just like a breath of fresh air. Like, it's just I immediately fall into the world. And I struggle with this one. I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to get to read about, them on the boat and Tom and Matt and everything. And then for a moment, I thought this chapter was Matt's dream, just like briefly. Just, obviously not for too long.
Hold up. Does that mean I'm going to have to get Matt dreams soon? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for a moment, I saw, just when I was opening the book to this page, I saw Matt in the text because he's on just the word Matt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, is this going to be like a dream from his perspective? Because it said, I saw the word Matt, and then I saw water dripped in the distance, hollow splashes echoing. I was like, stone bridges. I'm like, okay, there's a dream, right? Then I was like, oh, maybe it's Matt's dream, though, but then it wasn't. And then I think for me, two things. One, I think this is a commitment to, I'm going to keep telling you, I think it's exactly what you said. Jordan, in addition to the other things we talked about, wants to have a way for Rand to talk with the big bad. You know what I mean? Like, wants to have a way for them to get to communicate, right? And dreams is the way he's chosen for this to happen. And I think he's, on his end, he's thinking sometimes I'll have them just talk to each other, right? And then other times, like, that's just not going to happen every time, right? Like, sometimes there's got to be times when they're not, because that's more realistic. For instance, perhaps like I would have that think like, oh, I got to vary it. You know what I mean? But as we're saying, the variance isn't necessarily interesting or as interesting, right? I think for me, the problem was more, just the way some things were worded just felt a little clunky in comparison to normal.
Yeah.
And also some things didn't seem to quite make sense to me. There were two main parts. One was the continued descriptions of the floating platforms and how that was all there was in this area. But then he's like suddenly at a hedge maze. And I was like, wait a second. And I realized in dreams we can jump, we can switch.
Yeah.
But he didn't seem disconcerted. He didn't seem like, how did I not see the hedge previously? Where did the hedge come from? He just kind of rolled with it. And
I think I missed the switch to that. Like when exactly he is in the maze, he just was. And I thought it was, I think it was because kind of I stopped reading and came back to it like a few hours later or something. And I was going, maybe I just missed that he went into the hedge or something.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Well, he thinks about it, and then it gels just for an instance, and then he's just in a hedge maze, right? Every time he allowed himself to think of what surrounded him as a dream, the air shimmered, clouding his eyes.
Hmm.
It turned to gel, holding him just for an instant, and then the gritty heat prickled his skin and his throat, and then he's in a thorn hedge maze. How long had it been now? Question. So again, I think he's going for this sort of like jump. And I like the idea that things freeze around him, but then the fact that he wasn't reacting to change, I get that he's trying not to think about things, but I don't know. It just went a little, I think, too far to that realm for me. Like I get, yeah, in a dream, things just change. And sometimes it feels like we've been there forever, but I don't know. It was just that change was a bit abrupt to me. And then the other weird one was that a part of him, I get the idea that you've got this sense when you're in a dream that you like know something, but you can't fully express it.
Hmm.
And previously he's got this knowledge that thinking of the dream is bad. And then we see
Hmm.
the dream, thinking of the dream move him. So, okay, that's kind of bad. But then his way of escaping is to say, oh, it's a dream, right? This is a
Right.
dream. But it's like before that was the thing he was trying not to tell himself. But then it doesn't seem to improve anything. It just makes these mirrors and then he like becomes Baelsman. So it is all very confusing of like, well, wait, are you not remembering the dream? Because when you realize it's a dream, then you become Baelsman, but then you still escape. So maybe it's good. I don't know. It just seems like these conflicting ideas of I shouldn't remember the dream because it's bad. I do remember the dream because it's good to say that it's a dream, but then it turns bad, but then it is kind of good because I get away. So it feels like these constant like flip-flops of good or bad, remembering that it's a dream. And so that to me was just like, it left me in this weird, confused state as I then moved on to the next part. And so I feel like that's why it wasn't doing a lot for me because it just was more confusing than anything else,
Yeah.
which sure, dreams can be confusing, but it feels like there's supposed to be a little bit more going on besides that. I mean, sure, we could take he's walking on a bunch of skulls and, he's becoming Baal Zaman. So, I mean, I think that's what we're supposed to be left with. But for me, I got locked into the like, is remembering a dream good or bad instead of taking away the thing that I think Jordan wanted me to take away from this scene, which is like he could become Baal Zaman if he's not careful or something.
Right. And I
Yeah.
guess more importantly, like you said, like, okay, it's realistic in dreams that things won't be consistent or there won't be clear
Right.
rules of how it
Right.
works.
Right.
But are those things good for a story?
Right.
Is a whole other, thing. Like, again, is that realistic? Fine, but is it
Mm-hmm.
effective in terms of
Right.
narrative? I would say probably not. I also when I hit this, I was just like he's thinking an awful lot. Like when I kind of read it as thinking's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of because he does think here, allowed to
Right.
himself to think. The air shimmered, clouding in his
Right.
eyes, turned to jelly, holding him. And so, like, if you're trying to get away from something, then everything turning to
That's bad.
jelly and being stuck would be bad. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So you can't think or you'll get stuck in this jelly. But then I'm like, he's thinking all over the place here. Now he remembered hearing once that you could get out of a maze by always turning in the same direction. I was like, that's a pretty deep thought right there. But where's the jelly? Where's the, why are we not frozen at this? Even
Yeah.
staying in one place was dangerous. I'm like, how do you do that conceit? Don't think, right? And then you're like,
Yeah.
well, it's just simply not possible not to think. So it kind of doesn't really make any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I feel like the idea was that he wanted to write something where he was trying to figure out, I feel as if Jordan was trying to figure out an explanation for why Rand wasn't going to be thinking about why I'm in this dream. And so he
Right.
wanted a rule of repercussion for if you
Right.
think about the dream, something will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what bugs me is that he then uses the fact that it's a dream to sort of escape, but not really. I mean, he does wake up, but
Mm.
I don't know. So I feel like it's just, he creates a rule, then breaks it. I think that's what
Mm.
stops this from being as effective for me personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's, it wouldn't, I would probably press onward because I'm like, already got the promise from the harp that I'm going to get to see Tom and the boys on the river. So I'm cool. You know what I mean? So we're just kind of reading for that. And I feel like those parts of books, of great books exist. You know what I mean? Where you are reading a part and you're like, yeah, but I just want to kind of get to this next thing. Right.
Sure.
And that's not always bad because some people love the in-between, right? And I certainly love some in-between scenes like I think we can describe this next scene as, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's cool for us to kind of now lead into the next scene saying that, because these are both kind of like just, that in between storytelling, I feel.
I'm just gonna say, kids, no dream sequences. Don't just
I
don't
knew,
do it. Just don't
I
do
knew you
it.
were gonna say.
All
I
right.
think some of them are effective, but this one, I would not put this one up as a poster child of effectiveness of dream sequences if I was trying to make that argument.
All right.
But on the river.
Onto the river, and so we get kind of like, again, with time moving and getting kind of summary of what's sort of
Mhm.
happening along this journey.
Yeah.
We get a little bit more that Gleb is a problem,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
obviously everybody's mad at Gleb because he just fell asleep because he's an idiot.
Right.
So it's not, he
Right.
doesn't seem like that big of a threat to our main characters,
Mhm.
but I can see him
Right.
possibly mucking something up
Right.
in the
Exactly.
future.
Well, and
Uh,
I like how he changes and says that actually a mutiny is more dangerous. And so that was like, oh, that would seem worrisome if they need to kill everybody that would know about it, so there would be no proof of the mutiny. I was like, oh, that ramped things up a little bit. So
mm,
just in terms of like potential tension.
yeah, yeah. So I like that, and then Tom is like, well, don't worry about that because I'll distract everyone with my
Mm-hmm.
amazing entertainment skills, and so they do
Mm-hmm.
that, and
Mm-hmm.
then like, yeah, I think like the part where, yeah, you see I highlighted this,
Yeah.
that this was just, and the reason it didn't speak to me so much, but I was like, this is gonna speak to Jeff. This is what Jeff is like all about
Yes.
right here.
Oh, yes.
um this
Oh, yeah.
idea of like super duper old things, and I think I am like getting to understand on some level like the
Mhm.
appeal of that. Like he goes into such detail about how the river has worn away the feet of these
Right.
giant statues, and so that you get a real sense of this age of
Right.
these things, and like kind of the depth of the world. And
Mhm.
it's nice. It's a good trick because you don't really need to do much to sell that, right? Like you go, oh, there's
Right.
statues carved into the side of the thing, and they're worn away, and like you
Mhm.
get to kind of sell that there's like all this other stuff behind the curtain, whether you've really made up all that other stuff or
Yeah.
not. You can just put it out there and like let everybody
Mhm.
signal it, and like everybody will believe it, you know?
Absolutely. It's Brandon talks about it as the iceberg effect.
Right.
So you've only got the small bit of the iceberg above that people get to see, and then you want to give the sense that there's the full iceberg underneath, right? Without actually potentially always creating it.
Right.
Because some people do, as you sent me that meme about like you can't just world build forever. Some people do. They make they make the iceberg. It's there. But I do think it is skillful to be able to give the sense of that, whether it's built or not, right?
Yeah, I'll have to put
Yeah.
that meme since you referenced it. Maybe I'll make that the cover photo if I
I
can
think
find it again. It's like a Spider-Man Mary
Yeah,
Jane meme that I really
yeah,
like that meme format. So let's see if I can find that.
I think that's perfect. That's perfect. But cool. I'm glad to see. I think that Jordan at least knows his audience to a degree, or at least likes it himself, right? Because it's a continued theme, I think, throughout the stories. I think Daman just really kind of digs into it and expresses it
hmm
in this way, where we hear about this tower and then this like hand with this globe and stuff. Like, so there's each of these like things that he's seen, and then like the animals and stuff. We just get this sense of someone who's traveled, right, and what they've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm starting to feel that. Like I said, I don't think it quite scratches my itch as much as it does yours, but I get it.
Sure.
I get it. So
Sure.
what was the other thing that I thought was funny here? I like how Matt just doesn't give a crap about going home
Yep.
anymore at this point. He's like fully on
Yep.
like the treasure train at this point.
Yep.
And so I dig that. That's cool. Like
Yeah.
Rand's kind of like the only one who even gives a crap about Two Rivers anymore. Um,
Pretty much.
let's see. So okay, so then the next thing, well, so we've been set up a lot for Rand going crazy, And
Right.
we get like at the end of the dream sequence, one face. They had the same face,
Right.
where they're like pretty much
Right.
just telling you Rand's the Dark One, or he's like already
Right. Right.
under the Dark One's sort of
Mhm.
sway. But I guess the guy that I feel like should also be aware of this is Tom at this point. I mean, like this line that Tom says to him when he's going to take him down from the top of the mast.
Right.
He's just
Right.
acting like a crazy person up on top of the mast. Is everybody thinking you've gone mad? I feel like that should be setting off alarm bells to Tom himself. That he would like also have awareness, like, uh-oh, that seems like...
Right.
Did they also tell Tom about the dream? They did, didn't they? And then he said, don't tell Moraine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, he did. No, that is a good point because obviously it's not revealed who the dragon is, but he does
Right.
know the Dark One's chasing these boys.
Right.
He does know that Aes Sedai are interested in him, and he has been told about the dream, and then he sees Rand acting crazy. And that is a trait known. That's why everyone's scared of men with the power. So
Right.
yeah, no, I would agree.
I mean, the only possible explanation for this is Tom is a dark friend. Okay, I just want to say it every episode now, just to like...
Right, every episode.
just
Any
to
proof,
just-
any proof, because he's fine with it. This is all part of the plan. This is all part of the plan.
Another little bit of staging that I didn't understand here is he does his like super flippy flips down off the
Right.
thing, and that also indicates like, okay, reborn somebody or other, because why would Rand be able to do this? I mean, we know he's a pretty spry young lad, but like of course he shouldn't be able to do that. So that's also telegraphing this other thing about him being dragon reborn or reincarnation of someone. But when he does this, like everybody's looking at him up at the top, then he flippy flips down, and then he's like with Matt by himself, to the point where he can see Matt hiding this little dagger or showing it to himself. This kind of felt like Precious right here. It just felt like like he's just staring at the dagger and like, entranced by it or whatever. But they were alone for a wonder. I was like, oh, okay. Like I was not getting a sense that there would really be anywhere on this boat where I feel like they could be having these like private conversations like this, but I think that feels kind of like a cheat where I'm like, I'm not really feeling that, but okay, if you say so.
I will say for this one that Jordan does set it up somewhere. He does say that there's no real place that they're alone, because he says it's like 20 paces or 30 paces from end to end.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Rand's up at the top, he says that all the crewmen are like sort of crowded below, and then Matt's like off by himself in a corner. So he did sort of set up that everyone was away from Matt. So when he basically zip lines all the way down to where Matt is, he is actually alone in that part. So I mean, I hear you because again, but I think that since Jordan addresses that normally they're not alone at all, it is of course a trick, right? He's trying to like cram what he can into one chapter, and he wants to get a moment alone, and he wants to give Rand a moment of acting crazy. And I do hear you. But I do think at least this one is set up.
Right on. So Matt got...
I was just gonna say I love the Precious moment. Yeah, because it's totally that. He's just like staring.
Yeah, that's what it made me think. I was like, what?
Oh yeah.
I'm like not so worried about this dagger so much as like what's going on with Matt. Yeah, that also seems kind of crazy behavior as well. Of course, he did steal this knife from the treasure, so it could be like a hexed knife, it could be like God, who knows, but or it could be nothing, or maybe Matt's just going crazy in the same way that Rand is going crazy or whatever. But
everybody's going crazy.
Yeah, but of course the classic like, oh, plot device, we're not going to tell anybody about this thing. And Rand's immediately on board. He's like, yeah, that seems wise. That seems like a good idea. We'll just keep this knife that came from like a ghost treasure a total secret from everybody. Okay, cool.
It's all good. As he says, Mordeth didn't give it to me. I stole it myself.
Yeah.
So
totally fine.
Totally fine.
In the clear.
You didn't break the rules. It's all good. Um, no, for me, I even wasn't thinking about the craziness, but I think this is it's a fun moment to me of seeing Matt acting differently and then seeing this dagger, but then it does, I could see boys being like, well, she said this, I didn't do that. And I could see him kind of be like, well, I guess, and then like, well, at
Hmm.
least we'll have some money, so it does, obviously it's setting out alarm bells for the reader, right? But I feel like that's the fun part of watching these like kids. I mean, you don't want to watch them do things that are like just completely ridiculously stupid because then it doesn't feel realistic.
Right.
But I feel like these little moments of him explaining, I didn't really break the rules, and then him being like, well, we need money, we should sell it, and being like, sure, just don't tell anybody, right? Like I feel like obviously it's a setup, of course, right?
Hmm.
But I feel like it doesn't feel completely ridiculous. So I think that's what works for me in the moment about it, is it rides that line well enough.
Yeah, I didn't think this was as egregious as them going off exploring on their own in like the scary town that not even
Uh,
Trollocs want to go into. But it was still a little bit like okay, and like
I don't know.
you don't want to see through that kind of plot contrivance. Like when it's like,
Right.
oh, we're, we're gonna kind of come up with this contrivance for why he's not gonna talk about it so that it can remain a secret. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of it does take me out of it a little bit. It's like, oh, would he really do that? Considering like everything else that's going on here, does this really make good sense? But I guess you could sell it more too that he's acting crazy and he's not completely in his right mind either at this point. So I could buy that as well.
Yeah, we got some. I do think it rides the line, right? Like, I mean, we could have Rand flipping out about it more, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, you need to throw that over the edge right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we could have him being like, but we don't have any money, we need it. Like, there could have been a bit more of an argument there, right? That perhaps could, and then Matt refuses or whatever, right?
Right.
I am curious if that had been there, if that like extra 2 to 3 lines of dialogue had been there. Um, would that
Yeah,
have
I'd like him to.
grounded you more? What do you think?
I'd like him to have at least the thought that, oh, this could be a bad idea to keep it a secret, but begrudgingly, maybe I will, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Mm-hmm.
just want to get the sense that, like you said, that the characters aren't stupid, that they have, like,
Right.
cognizance of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and that what the potential downsides could be. And then even if you got to make a choice and choose to ignore that, well, okay, maybe that
Right.
helps me buy it a little bit more. But when it just seems like they're not even thinking about it, it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, come on.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it's the same comment you said about Matt. I mean, sorry, about Tom. It was Tom thinking about like, holy
Right,
crap, is he crazy?
right, right.
Like, you look crazy. Wait, are you
Yeah,
crazy?
I would like to
This
see
could be
that from
bad.
Tom because it would make me just
Right.
buy that
Right.
character
Right.
more. Because
Right.
Tom comes back and he says, "Luckily, I managed to convince the captain you weren't
Right.
crazy." He says it like
Right.
again, this crazy thing, and I just like there to be something again.
Uh,
We're in Rand's POV, but maybe something that looks around Rand's POV, like just
I was,
a weird little look came across his face when he said that, kind of alerting to
right.
the reader that like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, he's on to this is probably a bad scene.
See, it's funny you took the words right out of my mouth, which is I bet what you're wanting, right? Because
Hmm.
the one argument that can be made is, of course, these are kids, and the question is, if you're writing kids or certain kids, like, are there things that they're just not they're overlooking,
Right,
right?
sure.
But and as you said, we are in his POV, so the argument could be made, well, he's just not noticing these things, right?
Right.
But as you're saying, you could, as a writer, look to hint that to the reader. Exactly,
Yes,
exactly. So,
yes. And this will be
right.
talked about more in our Lolita podcast as well. Because we
All
have
this, all these,
many situations of looking around the direct narration. So, and I think in
but
third
as you're
person,
saying,
you're even more free to do it because again, this we're in Rand's POV. It's close third
yeah, third
person, but
person
you're
point
in
of
third person. Doing that in first person is pretty amazing and maybe a little like thorny, as we'll talk about in the
yeah.
next episode.
Well, I think the thing too here is also what that then means for Tom, right? Like,
Hmm.
that line could have been there that Tom gives him a little considering look, right? Um, Or does the fact that it's lacking make us question Tom's motivations just as you did? Like now you just say he's a dark knight, right?
Yeah.
So, and I do hear you. What rides that line of like, maybe it would have been better with this, or is that the intention? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough line. I do hear you. I do completely understand that if again Dragon Reborn through no to like destroy everything around them, people might be a little touchy
Yeah, yeah.
if they were around like a walking nuclear bomb, right?
Indeed.
Um, Indeed. So, I think there is a potential to be said for that. But then, of course, it does make us think once more about Tom's motivations, which continue to be hidden from us, right? So I think this continues that through line of why is Tom doing what he is doing? Why does Tom seem okay with them? Why does he want to help them? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyway, any closing thoughts on this one?
No more closing thoughts on this. Next chapter, I assume is gonna be a Perrin chapter back to Perrin right away, maybe. Or could we be in
Wait.
Bella's POV? Come on, fingers crossed. Fingers
Dude,
crossed.
I'm reading an amazing story right now called "Beware of Chicken," and
Uh-huh.
you totally get the chicken's POV.
Nice.
It's epic. So we definitely would not want to put that past it. I was
Beware
thinking
of
more,
Chicken, you said is the title of this?
Beware of Chicken.
Is
Yep.
it a short
Beware.
story?
No, it's real long.
Oh, it's a whole novel in the chicken's
It's a
perspective?
whole. Well, it doesn't start with the chicken's perspective.
Oh, okay. You just get the chicken's perspective.
You just end up getting the chicken's perspective. It's about this guy who becomes like a farmer. It's sort of a classic portal fantasy body swap. Someone from our time ends up in a fantasy landscape, just starts a farm, and then on the farm, the chicken starts becoming better, and then you start getting the chicken's perspective. So it's. I'll stop there. It's like a crazy cross between Charlotte's Web and Dr. Stone. For anyone who's familiar with that anime, I don't know if our listeners are watching a lot of anime, but anyway. But yeah, no. So it would be pretty amazing if we got Bella's perspective right here. I mean, obviously that is the fun of third person, right? That you can jump to anything. Though I will say, okay, this is just a quick thing. That story, Beware of Chicken, is actually first person meshed with third person, which is completely crazy to me, but somehow works. It's first person for the main character and then third person for all other characters. So anyway,
Interesting.
I shouldn't just say that you can only do multiple perspectives with third person. You could even have everyone be eyes, right? And then it gets confusing.
Right.
Anyway, we'll see next chapter. Is the traveling people relating to Bella?
Yeah, that's what we will. That's what we will soon see. See you next time, everybody.
See you then.